A swing creaks, leaking amber liquid, as Petrov's skin itches with crawling insects beneath. His palm stings where rusted gate hinges scraped it raw, dislodging grit that felt like dead beetles under his fingertips. The truck, oil gauge glows viscous amber, not oil, reflecting the asylum-esque skeletal Victorian facade through the windshield. Rain, slicked swamp water pools around the truck, tires swallowing the reflection of the asylum's broken windows. A distorted opera record skips on a player piano inside the asylum, soprano voice fracturing into wail. Song frequencies with each skip, the notes scraping like rusty hinges. Petrov spoot drips amber liquid onto the swamp mud, which hisses and bubbles where it touches. He feels the liquid ripple under his skin, tiny legs pricking through the fabric of his trousers. Fun sound focus, falling snow melting into rust. Asterisk, the swamp air tastes of copper and stagnant water, thick enough to choke on. He leans against the asylum gate, the rust flakes clinging to his jacket like dried blood. Each hinge drip sounds like a slow, wet tear. The gate, as metal groans, warped by decades of swamp rot. As he scrapes his palm again, pulling out more insect, like grit, the amber liquid on his boot spreads, seeping into the leather, and he feels a sudden sharp prickle beneath his skin where it touches. Sensory anomaly, seeing tiny insects crawling under his own skin. Asterisk, he stares at the amber puddle forming around his ankle, the liquid surface rippling as if disturbed by something unseen. The distorted opera record skips again, soprano voice cracking into a low, guttural wail song, echoing from the asylum's rotting interior. Petrov's truck engine coughs, a wet metallic rasp, then falls silent. The swamp air grows heavier, pressing against his chest. He rubs his ankle where the amber liquid seeped through his boot. The skin there feels unnaturally warm, Hoven color palette, candlelight orange and deep velvet. Asterisk, the swamp water glows faintly amber in the pitch black. Swallowing the asylum's windows whole, he remembers the newspaper clipping he found earlier. Asterisk, asylum gate remains unopened since 1892. Asterisk, the bell mentioned in the clipping. Supernatural object, rings only when a ghost is present, but the asylum is silent, too silent. He bends down, ignoring the prickle beneath his skin, and lifts a loose, rusted hinge. The metal is cold, slick with amber liquid. Sound focus, falling snow melting into rust. Asterisk, the liquid drips from the hinge into the swamp, each drop a tiny fun plink on the water, a surface. He watches the amber liquid pool around his ankle, the surface now visibly shifting. Sensory anomaly, insects crawling under skin. Asterisk, he feels them moving, tiny legs scraping against his flesh beneath the amber liquid, a surface. The swamp water bubbles gently, reflecting the faintest candlelight orange glow from within the asylum's broken windows. Petrov's skin at the ankle tilts, a thin translucent layer lifting away like wet parchment, revealing the amber liquid, a surface beneath. Insects crawl, their minuscule legs pricking through the liquid, moving with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The distorted opera record skips again, soprano voice now, a wet, gurgling whisper. The swamp water bubbles around his boot, the amber liquid swirling where the skin peeled away. Divine comedy twist, asterisk, he believes this is the peace he sought, the dissolution into something vast and luminous. The insects move, their tiny bodies visible through the amber liquid. The asylum gate swings slightly, dripping amber onto the mud, the sound of falling snow melting into rust filling the silence. The bell was never supposed to be touched. Its iron mouth hung from the wall like a rusted grin, the chain looped slack and greasy around its neck. I knew this, everyone did, but the tabby's claws had already hooked the metal, its torn ears twitching with something like glee. The chain clanked teen, a sound too loud in the wet dark, and the cat's tail lashed the puddle at my feet. Amber liquid swirled there, thick as syrup, and I could see the way it moved, slow and deliberate, like something breathing beneath the surface. My fingers curled around the bell's throat, cold, slick, the metal yielded with a groan, the chain stretched taut, then snapped with a wet crack, the sound vibrating up my wrist. The tabby hissed, not at me but at the wall, as if scolding. The bell swayed, heavy as a corpse, and I, wrenching it free, sent a shower of rust flakes skittering to the floor. They landed with tiny funplinks on, each one a needle prick in the silence. The bell's mouth was wider than it should have been, the iron rim jagged like teeth. I didn't think, just shoved my hand inside. The interior was smooth, unnaturally so, as if licked clean by something vast and hungry. My fingers brushed the back wall, and the metal scraped not against stone, but against something softer, flesh, no, wet parchment peeling in slow strips. Then the climb. Not a ring, a full mouth opening. The sound wasn't in my ears. It was in my bones, a vibration that split my skull from the inside. The bell shuddered in my grip, and the tabby's claws dug into my thigh, not to stop me, but to free direct. My palm pressed deeper, knuckles pressing against something slick and yielding. Not blood, something worse. The cat's torn ear was in my hand. I didn't scream, didn't flinch. The ear was warm, still twitching, the fur damp as if dragged through swamp muck. The bell's chime grew louder, a wet gurgle now, and the metal around my wrist breathed, expanding, contracting, as if the bell itself was swallowing me. The tabby's other ear was pressed against the wall, listening, waiting. Then the shattering. Not glass, not porcelain. The bell's mouth split open like a jaw, and the sound was 1,000 rusted nails dragged across a chalkboard. The fragments fell as to snow, not white but the color of old bruises, each flake catching the dim candlelight and turning the hue of wet ash. They drifted down, sticking to my jacket, my skin, and I could feel them twin melt to where they touched, seeping into the fabric like ink. The tabby yowled, a sound half pain, half triumph, and the bell's remnants scraped against the floor, each shard a serrated edge. My hand was inside the bell's throat, and the bell was ringing, not with sound, with vision. My arm wasn't mine anymore. The skin split open like wet paper, peeling back in slow, deliberate strips. Beneath was the same amber liquid, thick and glistening, and beneath, Foodie the tiny legs scuttling, pawing. Not insects, not anymore. They moved with purpose, deliberate, and I could feel them, pressing against the underside of my skin, hungry. The bell's chime grew louder, a wet, gurgling song, and the tabby's claws bit into my thigh, not to hold me back, but to keep me still. The first strip of skin lifted away, not pain, not yet, just the slow, inevitable unraveling. The liquid bubbled where the skin parted, and the legs beneath twitched, pressing closer. The bell's chime filled my head, a distorted opera now, the soprano's voice fracturing into something guttural, something twin-hungry. The tabby's eyes were on me, not with fear, but with forecognition. I understood then. This wasn't a bell. It was a foodie mouth. The wallpaper was crimson, like dried blood under candlelight, its texture rough as wet parchment against my fingertips. It peeled away in slow strips, revealing plaster beneath that wept moisture like open wounds. I traced the stains, watching them bleed into velvet shadows, the color of old bruises. The cat, the tabby with torn ears, watched me from where it crouched on a splintered windowsill, its eyes reflecting the dim light as two small moons. The newspaper clipping was tucked behind a loose fragment of wallpaper, yellowed and brittle like ancient bone. It crackled when I pulled it free, wet parchment tearing in slow motion. The sound was echoed by an opera record, skipping on the phonograph across the room, a distorted waltz played by unseen dancers. The headline asterisk patients die screaming. It is in the bell! Asterisk I smoothed out the clipping on my knee, the ink smearing slightly under my touch. It spoke of patients found dead in their beds, faces twisted in silent screams, eyes fixed wide open as if witnessing something unimaginable, and always beside them, the bell. My heart thudded against my ribs like a trapped animal, each beat resonating with the distorted opera, the two sounds merging into one discordant rhythm. The cat's ears twitched, its tail lashing in time to this symphony of dread. I reached out tentatively towards the bell hanging from the wall, its iron mouth open wide as if laughing at my hesitation. My fingers brushed against it, and I could feel it breathing, a wet rasp that echoed through me like a pulse. The cat hissed, its claws scraping against wood, but whether in warning or encouragement, I could tell. Then the bell rang, not with sound, but vision. Insects crawled under my skin, tiny legs scuttling beneath the ink of the newspaper clipping. They moved deliberately, purposefully, as if seeking something specific. A secret hidden within me they could unravel like a thread. The opera record skipped again, but this time it wasn't just distortion, it was swordwordsy. Asterisk, it is in the bell. Asterisk, it whispered, over and over, the voice fractured into 1,000 shards of glass. I looked down at my hand, the one that had touched the bell, and saw them, tiny legs writhing under translucent skin. They moved beneath the surface like shadows cast by an unseen moon, their purpose clear now, digging deeper, burrowing inside me until they found what they sought. And then I understood why the patient screamed, not because of what was soothing the bell, but because it rang them open from within. The cat yowled, a sound of triumph or despair. I didn't know which, and leaped down from its perch. It stood before me now, eyes burning into mine with an intelligence far beyond mere animal instinct, and in those fathomless depths I saw my reflection, no longer human but something else entirely. Something other. The bell rang again, a wet gurgle this time, as if echoing the cat-esque cry. My hand trembled as it reached out once more towards that iron mouth, drawn inexorably closer by forces unseen yet undeniable. The insects crawled faster now, their legs clicking like tiny bones against my flesh, and I knew this was not madness but revelation. This was ascension, word count 897. The bell lay shattered at my feet, its iron fragments glinting like broken teeth in the candlelight. I had swung the wrench with all my might, driven by some primal urge to silence that wet rast forever. But now it was silent indeed, reduced to jagged shards and a dull ache in my forearm where one of those shards had embedded itself. The cat watched me from its perch on what remained of the windowsill, eyes reflecting the dim light like two small lanterns. It seemed neither impressed nor displeased by my actions, merely curious. I could almost hear it thinking, "What now?" Asterisk. I picked up one of the larger pieces of bell and examined it under the flickering flame. The metal was pitted and rusted, as if aged centuries beyond its years. As I turned it over in my hands, something caught my eye, a faint inscription etched into the surface. Asterisk, it is not just a bell. Asterisk, it read. Asterisk, it read. Asterisk, but an echo chamber for ancient whispers. Asterisk, my heart quickened at this revelation. If true, and given recent events, why shouldn't it be? Then what had I unleashed by destroying it? The cat stirred then, leaping down from its perch and padding towards me with deliberate steps. It nuzzled against my hand, holding the bell fragment, its tail wrapping around my wrist like a question mark. I looked down at our reflection in one of the intact shards, a grotesque distortion of man and beast, silhouetted against the swirling orange light of the candle flame. Then I saw it. The cat, its amber eyes glinting not with curiosity but hunger as they gazed upon something beyond my sight. Following its line of vision, I turned towards where it stared and froze. Every surface in that room, floorboards, walls, ceiling, glowed with an otherworldly luminescence, pulsating like a heartbeat gone mad. The amber light seemed to seep from within the very fabric of reality itself, illuminating the decay and rot beneath its sickening glow. The opera record groaned again, not words this time, but metallic scraping, as if something vast and heavy was dragging itself across the phonograph. As needle, the sound echoed through me like a chill wind blowing through hollow bones, raising gooseflesh on my arms despite the stifling heat of that room. I took one step forward, then another, and another still, until I stood bathed in amber light. It felt alive beneath my fingertips, a wet pulsation that seemed to throb with anticipation or hunger, or perhaps both. The cat mewled at my feet, its tail lashing against the rotting floorboards like a metronome counting down some unseen symphony of dread, and then I understood. The room was not just glowing, it was soin-breathing. A wet rasp echoed through that amber breath, a sound all too familiar now, echoed again by the distorted opera record, until they were one and the same, inseparable as night from day. I reached out tentatively towards the nearest wall, fingers brushing against its surface. The light seemed to intensify at my touch, as if it could feel me there, and then something happened that defied all reason. The wall finned moved, not like liquid or jelly, but rather like flesh. It shifted and pulsed beneath my hand as if alive, pushing back against my palm with a wet, rhythmic throb. And within this amber flesh I saw things moving, not just under the surface, but through it, shadows writhing like worms beneath skin. My stomach heaved at the sight. Bile rose in my throat like burning acid. Yet even amidst such revulsion there was fascination, a terrible, irresistible compulsion to reach out further still and plunge my hand deep into that living decay. But then something else caught my eye. The cat's reflection in one of those moving shadows on the wall. Its eyes were no longer amber but black, as deep and fathomless as endless night, and they seemed to beckon me closer, urging me onwards towards whatever lay beyond this room of crawling light, towards whatever Tomeditu wanted me to find. I took a step forward, then another, and then I was running headlong into the embrace of that living darkness. Word count 897. My forearm burns like an ember freshly plucked from a dying fire. It pulses with heat, throbbing against the coolness of my fingertips as I trace its length. This isn't merely sensation. It is color or amber seeping into flesh, infecting me. The newspaper clipping crumbles in my hand, disintegrating like ancient parchment left too long in damp earth. Insects scurry out from between the pages, tiny legs clicking against each other as they flee their ruined nest. I watch them skitter across the asylum's rotting floorboards, each one a miniature escape artist wriggling into some unseen crevice or joint. The sound of falling snow has begun to accelerate, the hushed suzerain now akin to hurried whisperings, urgent and insistent. It fills my ears, drowning out all else, until there is nothing but the white noise of winter's descent. Yet I feel no chill. Instead, warmth radiates from within me, spreading from that pulsating mark on my arm. I look down at myself, at the amber glow now casting long shadows across my chest and abdomen, and realize with a strange detachment how much it resembles decay, not the rotten flesh of death, but something more primal, the slow decomposition of once living things into earth, into nourishment for unseen roots. My hands tremble as I reach out towards that living wall, towards those shadows writhing beneath its surface like worms through skin, and then they are moving again, fingers brushing against amber flesh. It yields to my touch, shifting and pulsing with a rhythm all too familiar now, the heartbeat of this place. Kindling that begins at my fingertips before racing up my arms like wildfire, leaving trails of gooseflesh in its wake. It feels alive, aware. I gasp aloud, an involuntary sound torn from deep within me, and then I am stepping forward once more, drawn irresistibly towards whatever lies beyond this room of crawling light and living decay, towards whatever Turfy wants me to find. The bell chimes, not a single note, but an entire symphony played in the space between heartbeats. It echoes through every corridor of this crumbling asylum, each toll resonating within my bones until they hum with its rhythm. And then I am ascending, one hand trailing along the wall's living surface while the other grasps at shadows. Enlightenment awaits me here amidst these amber corridors. I can feel it like a physical force pulling me ever onwards. And so I climb each step, bringing me closer to understanding, to truth, to whatever lies beyond this world of flesh and decay. The orange tabby, a smear of dirty velvet against the cold stone, swatted at the tarnished silver ball, a dull flink-link against the floor, barely audible above the escalating hiss and crackle emanating from the gramophone. It demanded attention, this creature, a small, insistent need woven into the fabric of the asylum's decay. Pet needs, always pet needs. I ignored it, focusing instead on the bell, the insistent, delicate chime that felt less like sound and more like a realignment of bone. Each ring a tightening of the amber glow within me, a slow internal fracturing. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I ascended another spiral, each step a deliberate act of surrender. Not to gravity, but to the pull, the enlightenment. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a physical force, a warm current dragging me upwards, peeling me away from the mundane. The air, though stagnant, tasted of something else, not ozone, not rot, but something akin to polished metal, a faint coppery tang. The gramophone, stuck in a loop of some distorted opera, sputtered and skipped, the aria now fractured into disjointed shrieks and moans, siscritch, scritch, the needle fighting against the ruined vinyl. The cat wound itself around my ankles, a rough, insistent pressure. It licked at a damp spot on the back of my neck, a spot I hadn't noticed before, a slickness that wasn't sweat. The amber warmth pulsed there, mirroring the rhythm of the bell. I brushed the animal away with a curt gesture. Useless distraction. It mewed, a plaintive sound swallowed by the escalating chaos of the music. Each wall here breathed. Not visibly, not with expansion and contraction, but with a subtle shift in texture, a rearrangement of the shadows. The amber light wasn't Tuihontuath, the walls it was the walls, a viscous living fluid seeping into the stone. My fingers traced the surface, and the sensation was wrong, not unpleasant, but fundamentally alien. Like touching the inside of my own body, stretched and thinned and made external. I paused, my hand still pressed against the pulsing wall. A tremor ran through the structure, a low, guttural hum that resonated in my teeth. The bell chimed again, a cascade of notes that felt like ice water injected directly into my veins. I closed my eyes, and the darkness behind my lids wasn't empty. It writhed. Shapes formed and dissolved. Not images, not memories, but to it possibilities. The potential for rearrangement, the blueprint for dismantling. The cat, persistent, rubbed against my leg again, purring a low, vibrating rumble. I could feel the animal's rough tongue against my skin, a sandpaper rasp. It felt off, the texture, the weight. I glanced down, and for a fleeting moment, the cat's back seemed to ripple, to shift. The orange fur blurred, and I thought I saw a glimpse of something else beneath. Something slick and scaled. I blinked and it was gone. Just the cat, just a trick of the light. But the sensation lingered, a prickling at the base of my skull. The gramophone sputtered, the music accelerating into a frenzy of static and fragmented melody. The bell's chime grew more insistent, more demanding. The walls pulsed faster, the amber light intensifying, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and writhed like living things. I reached out, my hand hovering over the wall, and then I pressed my palm against its surface. The warmth was overwhelming, a searing heat that spread through my arm, engulfing my shoulder, my chest. It felt like dissolving, like being unmade, and then a new sensation, a tearing, a peeling. I looked down, and my breath hitched in my throat. It began at my fingertips. A subtle flaking, a lifting of the skin. Not like a burn, not like a rash. It was shedding, like a snake sloughing its scales. But the skin wasn't falling sur de fave. It was peeling subtly away from the cat's back. The orange tabby, now pressed against my hand, was merely a conduit. The amber light wasn't within the walls. It was within Trifite, and it was escaping. My own flesh, lifting and curling, revealing something underneath. Something that wasn't me. Something that had always been there. The bell chimed, a final triumphant peal, and I understood this wasn't ascent. It was disassembly. The heat intensified. A pressure against my skin. A violation. Not just heat, but a viscous warmth, like being submerged in something alive. The amber light pulsed, a frantic heartbeat against my eyelids, even with them squeezed shut. Disassembly! The word echoed, not in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. It wasn't a thought, not really, more like a data stream, a sudden influx of understanding. My hand remained pressed against the wall, the surface yielding beneath my palm. It wasn't solid, not anymore. It flowed. A slow, agonizing ripple, like watching a glacier melt in fast motion. The texture shifted, no longer stone, but something organic, a membrane. I could feel the pulse now, not just the warmth, but the twinthrum of something living beneath. The newspaper clippings, the faded ink of forgotten headlines blurred behind my eyes. They weren't images anymore. They were insects, tiny, chitinous legs skittering across the inside of my skull, a frantic, silent dance. The bell chimed again, a cascade of ice shards piercing the amber glow. I tried to pull my hand away, but it was stuck. Not physically stuck, but integrated. The membrane clung to my skin, a second layer of being. The gramophone's aria, a mangled symphony of despair, reached a fever pitch. Thwack, 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 went a warped vinyl, a frantic heartbeat mirroring the pulsing walls. It wasn't just sound anymore, it was vibration. A tangible force pushing against my ribs. The cat, the orange tabby, rubbed against my leg, a persistent, insistent pressure. Its purr, a low, guttural rumble, vibrated through my bones. I looked down, and the insects swarmed, a black tide against the amber light. They crawled not just on the newspaper, not just on the inside of my eyelids, but Tuffy on the cat, a writhing mass beneath the orange fur. I blinked. The fur seemed to shift, a momentary glimpse of something else beneath. Something slick, segmented, and utterly alien, a chitinous exoskeleton. The snowfall began, not outside, not through a window, but 2 foot inside, the asylum. Wet, clinging flakes that dissolved on my skin, leaving a residue of cold and a taste like rusted iron. It wasn't a visual phenomenon, it was a sensory assault. The dampness clung to my throat, choked the air from my lungs. A drumbeat against my eardrums, a slow, relentless rhythm that resonated with the pulsing walls. Thump, thump, thump. I felt a tearing, a peeling, not painful, not precisely, more like an unraveling, a fundamental restructuring. I looked down at my fingertips. The skin wasn't cracking, wasn't blistering. It was shedding, a thin layer of epidermis curling away from the flesh beneath, revealing something other, something that wasn't me. The amber light intensified, bathing the scene in a sickly, incandescent glow. The bell chimed again. A triumphant peal that seemed to resonate within my very being. The understanding crashed over me, a tidal wave of realization. This wasn't ascent. It wasn't enlightenment. It was disassembly, a deconstruction of self. The amber light wasn't Tuionai me. It Tuiwasu me. Or, more accurately, it was what was replacing me. The feline pressure against my leg intensified. The cat's fur felt wrong, coarse, and unnatural. I saw with a horrifying clarity that the cat was not an animal at all. It was a conduit, a vessel, a temporary shell for something else. My breath hitched in my throat. My vision swam. The insects swarmed, a black tide consuming the amber light. The walls pulsed faster, the gramophone's area warped into a screeching, agonizing wail. The falling snow intensified a blizzard of cold and iron. I felt a pull, a deep, irresistible force drawing me apart. My bones ached, not with pain, but with a strange, unsettling flexibility. They shifted. The data stream intensified, a torrent of information flooding my consciousness, blueprints, schematics. The design for something new. The bell chimed one last time, a final resonant echo that seemed to shatter the very fabric of reality. And then a final sensation, a complete dissolution of self. The feeling of falling not downwards but 20 outwards in, dispersing, becoming something else. The walls no longer pulsed. The gramophone fell silent. The snow ceased its descent. There was only expansion. A vast echoing emptiness filled with the cold metallic tang of something ancient and alien, and then nothing. The key felt slick. Not with oil, but with something warmer, something internal. I pressed it against the small of my neck, a habitual gesture, a phantom itch I hadn't realized I possessed until this moment. The metal didn't meet resistance. It yielded. Not like flesh, not like bone, but like a membrane giving way. A slow, wet give. I didn't feel pain, not at first. Just a pressure, a warmth spreading from the point of contact, blooming outwards like a stain. The orange tabby, a mangy thing with torn ears, butted against my leg, insistent. A rhythmic thumpy of its head against denim. It nudged a fragment of bell porcelain chipped and stained amber foot with a paw. A delicate chime, quickly swallowed by the warped, echoing aria from the gramophone. The cat wanted something. It always wanted something. Not food, not water. Attention, distraction. A small, insistent need that felt calculated. I ignored it, focusing on the key, now half submerged in my skin. It wasn't sinking in, not exactly. It was twenty becoming, the metal elongated, thinned, branching filaments spreading beneath the surface. A network of cold fire blooming outwards. The aria, a soprano's lament, fractured, the notes distorting, becoming less music and more resonance. It vibrated through the floorboards, through my boots, through the nascent metal within my flesh. A dull ache began to throb, not in my neck, but in the place where my spine should be. I tried to pull away, to wrench the key free, but the movement was wrong. My arm didn't respond. It felt distant, disconnected, like a puppet's limb controlled by strings I couldn't see. The cat, sensing my immobility, doubled its efforts, batting the bell fragment with increasing urgency. Chink, chink, chink. Each chime resonated with the growing warmth, the spreading metal. The porcelain felt brittle, fragile. I could see hairline fractures spiderwebbing across its surface. The orange fur, normally coarse, felt wrong, too soft, too yielding. I blinked. Trying to focus, the fur seemed to ripple, to flow, like water disturbed by a submerged object. The air tasted of iron and something else. Something acrid, like burnt sugar. The scent clung to the back of my throat, choking off my breath. I glanced down. The metal wasn't just beneath my skin, it was configuring it. The flesh around the key was shifting, stretching, molding itself around the metal, becoming part of it. My skin wasn't tearing, wasn't bleeding. It was dissolving, not into blood, but into a viscous metallic sheen. The gramophone's area reached a fever pitch, a screeching, agonizing wail that seemed to tear at the edges of my sanity. The bell fragment, dislodged by the cat, rolled across the floor, coming to rest against the base of the gramophone. A final, muted chime. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. My vocal cords felt muted, dampened. The cat, oblivious to my internal struggle, rubbed against my leg, purring. A low, guttural rumble that vibrated through my bones. The orange fur felt slick, the texture alien. I looked down. The cat's eyes, normally a vibrant green, were dull, opaque, black, and then a flicker, a momentary glimpse of something else beneath the fur, a flash of segmented chitin, a ripple of scales. The walls began to yield, not collapsing, not crumbling, releasing cake. The stone seemed to soften, to dissolve, the mortar turning to viscous, amber liquid. The asylum wasn't a structure anymore. It was a vessel, a chrysalis, and I was the thing inside. The metal within my neck pulsed, a frantic internal heartbeat. It spread, reaching for my spine, my skull, my limbs. The cat pressed closer, its purr intensifying, a hypnotic rhythm. The room seemed to stretch, to elongate, the walls receding into a vast, echoing emptiness. The air thinned, becoming brittle, fragile. My bones ached, not with pain, but with a strange, unsettling flexibility. They shifted, they rearranged. The data stream intensified, a torrent of information flooding my consciousness, blueprints, schematics. Not of the asylum, but of something else. Something vast, ancient, and utterly alien. The designs weren't meant for stone and mortar. They were meant for me, or rather, for what I was becoming. The warmth intensified, a searing heat that consumed my flesh. The cat's fur, now slick and cold, brushed against my cheek, a final lingering touch. The last vestiges of self dissolved, the last threads of consciousness unraveling. The walls ceased to exist, the gramophone fell silent. The cat, no longer a cat, but a conduit, a vessel, a bridge between worlds dissolved into the amber light. The asylum released me, not as a prisoner escaping, but as a cathode ray ejected from a tube, a surge of energy, a burst of light, and then nothing. A vast, echoing emptiness filled with the cold, metallic tang of something ancient and alien expansion, a scattering of particles, a dispersal of being. I was not destroyed, I was distributed. The key came free with a sound like a wet peal of thunder, slow, deliberate, the way a bruise unfurls beneath skin. My fingers closed around it, but it didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt like pruning my neck, smooth and yielding, the edges of it too familiar. I pulled harder, a slow unzipping. Not of flesh, of tuva membrane. Something between skin and sinew, something that had been holding the key in place for too long, something that had been waiting. The cat's torn ear twitched. Not from the sound, the absence of it. The falling snow had stopped. No creak of ice, no whisper of wind. No distant thuthi of flakes hitting the roof. Just the hollow hum of the asylum's bones, the way it had before the key went in, the way it had before the aria started, before the warmth, before the metal. I exhaled, a puff of steam, but not from cold, from pressure. The key slid free, and with it, a sliver of my neck followed. Not a cut, not a tear, a peeling like the bark of a willow in spring, but slower, thicker. The skin didn't fall away in strips. It tightened, folded, curling back on itself like a glove pulled inside out. The cat watched. Its green eyes, no, not green, not anymore, were dull slits, pupil, less voids. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, it didn't move, just stared. My fingers trembled. Not from cold, from the suandy weight of what I was seeing. The skin beneath wasn't mine, it was coarse. Torn at the edges, just like the cat's ears. The same texture, the same kuvidiv, the same way it caught the light dim but not dull, like a rusted penny but warm. Alive, the cat's tail lashed once, a dry, brittle sound like a twig snapping underfoot. Its paw extended, claws retracting into the flesh of my wrist. Not digging in, but twisting. Probing, I should have screamed. But my throat was gone too, not missing. Replaced. The space where my Adam's apple had been was now a smooth, furred hollow. The cat's paw pressed against it. Fingers. No, putty pussy brushing the new skin. It wasn't hair. It wasn't fur. It was two skin away. My skin, or what was left of it. The bell rang. Not the chime, not the time. A deep, resonant tooth-o-swith, like a church bell struck from the inside. The sound didn't come from the bell on the floor. It came from Twinbime, from the place where my neck had been. The cat's head tilted, its mouth opened, not a yawn, not a hiss, a smile, not a cat's smile, a human's, a child's side wide, too many teeth, too many foot arrows. The asylum sighed, not the groan of settling wood, not the creak of old hinges, a sound like a held breath, finally released. A rush of air, thick with the scent of wet parchment and something toil older, something that had been buried too deep to name, my skin peeled back further, not in strips. In Swinlayacy, like the pages of a book, turning themselves. The new skin wasn't just orange, it was strid-patterned, striped, not like a tabby, like Thwin me, like the schematics, like the designs that had burned into my bones. The cat's fur rippled, not from movement, from fruvement fresher, from something underneath, pushing out. Scales, not fish scales, not snake scales. Hui machine, scales, smooth, segmented, cold to the touch. I didn't scream, I unraveled. The last of my skin fell away in one piece, curling into the cat's paw like a gift. The asylum exhaled again, deeper this time, a sound like a dam breaking. Water rushed in, not from outside, from cell inside. The walls breathed. The floor shifted, the cat's body lengthened, bones snapping and rearranging, fur dissolving into something slicker, something quite harder. And then the bell rang again, not from the cat, from 20 Mai, from the place where my neck had been, from the place where the key had gone, from the place where the asylum sweetheart was. The key pulled free with the sound of a zipper opening a wound. Not a sound, a feeling. My fingers sank into the cold metal, but the metal was wrong. It was the shape of my neck, the curve of my jawbone beneath the skin, the way the skin had been stretched thin and brittle over the bone. I pulled harder, and the key unzipped, and not the keyhole, but the skin itself. A slow, deliberate peeling, like the bark of a tree that's been pressed flat and forgotten. The air held its breath. No snow, no wind, just the hollow, wet sound of the asylum's bones settling into something new. I exhaled. A puff of steam, but not from cold, from pressure. The key slid free, and with it a thin strip of skin curled back, not torn, thin peeling. Like the page of a book turned too fast. The skin beneath wasn't mine. It was orange, like rust on a penny, but warm, alive. Coarse at the edges, like the torn ear of the cat. I could see the tiny, almost invisible lines in it, lines like the grooves in a worn coin or the pattern on the cat's fur. The cat watched. Its green eyes, no, not green, not anymore, were dull slits empty. It didn't move, just stared. Its tail flicked once, a dry, brittle snap, like a dead twig underfoot. Then its paw lifted. Not claws, just the pads. They brushed the place where my Adam's apple should have been. The place where my throat was now smooth, furred hollow. The pads pressed gently, testing the new skin. It wasn't fur, it was skin. To me, skin, or what was left. The bell rang, not a chime, a deep, resonant tweether from the center of my chest, from the place where my neck had been. It wasn't the bell on the floor, it was inside me. The sound vibrated up my arms, through my fingers into the key. The key, now smooth and warm, felt like the shape of my own face. The cat's head tilted, its mouth opened, not a hiss, a smile wide, too many teeth. Rows of them, like the teeth in the asylum's old ledger, the ones I'd read by candlelight. A child's smile. Oh, I didn't scream. My throat was gone, replaced. The asylum sighed, a sound like a dam breaking under the weight of water. The walls shifted, the floor breathed. The cat's fur rippled not from wind, but from something underneath, pushing out. Scales. Not fish, not snake. Machine scales, smooth, segmented, cold. The skin peeled back further, not in strips, in layers, like the pages of a book. Turning themselves, the new skin wasn't just orange, it was sweet-patterned, striped. Not like a cat, like the schematics burned into my bones. Like the designs on the asylum's old blueprints. The cat's smile widened, its eyes went black. Then, for a single second, I saw myself in them. Not the trucker, not the man. A shape, a pattern. The key slid from my fingers. It fell, not onto the floor, onto the keyhole in the wall. The wall opened, not with a sound, with a slow, wet tin, unfolding, like a flower blooming in reverse, and beneath the keyhole where the key had been pulled, the skin of the wall peeled back. It wasn't the wall, it was my skin. The cat's paw reached for it, not to touch, to hold we. The bell rang again, from the place where the key had gone in, from the place where my neck was, from the place where the asylum's heart had been.